Before the fluorescent lights of the grocery store started to hum their late evening song, before the cashier with the tired eyes looked up from her register, before anyone noticed the way my hands were shaking as I counted coins, my son said something no child should ever have to say. "Daddy, I'm so hungry. We haven't had a real meal in days." I froze. The quarters slipped between my fingers. But it was the second question that made the world tilt sideways. "And if we go back home, will he hit you again?" 10 feet behind us, 3 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a business magazine stopped pushing their cart. Because men like them were used to board meetings and power plays, not 7-year-old boys talking about hunger and violence in the middle of a SaveMart checkout line. My name is Miles Harper. I'm 28 years old, and I worked, I don't know what I am anymore. 11 days ago, I was a husband, a stay-at-home parent, someone who knew exactly what his place in the world was, even if that place was small and controlled and slowly suffocating him. Now, I'm a man living in a 12-year-old sedan with 2 sons who don't understand why we can't go back to the house with the big backyard and the warm beds. The SaveMart sits on the east side of the city, in a neighborhood that used to have a name but now just has a zip code. The kind of place where the parking lot has more potholes than spaces, where the shopping carts have wobbly wheels, and where nobody makes eye contact because everyone's carrying their own weight of things they'd rather not discuss. It's open 24 hours, which means it's always half empty and always too bright, the kind of brightness that makes you feel exposed, like standing under an operating room light. I'd chosen this particular store because it was the farthest one from our old neighborhood, from Vincent, from the possibility that someone might recognize me and make a phone call I couldn't afford them to make. My son stood beside me at the checkout counter. Oliver was 7, Liam was 5. They wore jackets that didn't quite fit Oliver's, was too small across the shoulders because he'd grown 3 inches in the last year, and Liam's was too big because it had been Oliver's 2 years ago and I hadn't had money to replace it. Their shoes were clean. I'd made sure of that this morning with a wet paper towel in the gas station bathroom where we'd brushed our teeth, because that was the thing about being in a situation like ours. You could be living in your car. You could be counting your last $18. You could be rationing peanut butter like it was liquid gold. But your children's shoes would be clean, and their hair would be combed, and you would smile at them like the world wasn't ending. Because that's what you did when you were a parent and you'd failed at everything except loving them. The items on the conveyor belt told a story I didn't want anyone to read. Store-brand white bread, the cheapest peanut butter, the kind that separated and had to be stirred, a gallon of milk that was 2 days from expiration and marked down, a box of generic cereal, 6 bananas because they were 49 cents a pound, a can of soup, another can of soup, 2 packets of ramen noodles because they were 12 cents each. I'd done the math 3 times in my head before I even entered the store. The math that said if I spent exactly $18.67, we would have food for 5 days, maybe 6 if I skipped meals. Which I'd been doing, which Oliver had noticed, even though I thought I'd been careful. The cashier started scanning items. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound felt like a small judgment. I watched the total climb on the digital display. $4.32, $7.18, $11.94. Oliver and Liam stood close to me, one on each side. Oliver had his hands shoved in his jacket pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched in that way he'd developed over the last 11 days. The posture of a child who was trying to make himself smaller, trying not to draw attention, trying not to ask for things he knew we couldn't afford. Liam was holding a small plastic dinosaur he'd had in his pocket since we left, a green stegosaurus with a broken tail. He turned it over and over in his hands, humming quietly to himself. The total hit $15.23. I had 3 more items to go. I did the math again. The bread was $1.29. The second can of soup was $1.89. The ramen was $0.24. That would put me at $18.65. I had $18.67, 2 cents to spare. But then the cashier picked up the bread, and I saw the price tag. Not $1.29, $1.49. They'd raised the price. 20 cents. Just 20 cents, but it was 20 cents I didn't have. My chest tightened. The kind of tightness that comes when you realize that 20 cents stands between your children eating and your children going hungry, and there's nothing you can do about it except make a choice you don't want to make. Actually, I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Actually, I don't need the bread. The cashier looked at me. She was maybe 19, with purple streaks in her hair and gauges in her ears. She'd probably seen 1,000 transactions tonight, but something in my face made her pause. You sure? She asked. Yeah, we're good. She took the bread off the scanner, set it aside, continued ringing up the rest. The total settled at $17.16. I had $18.67 in my hand, mostly quarters, some dimes. $3 bills that were so worn they felt like fabric. I started counting it out onto the counter. Oliver watched me. He was too smart, too observant. He'd always been that way, even as a toddler. The kind of child who noticed when you were sad before you realized it yourself. Daddy, Oliver said quietly. His voice had that careful quality to it. The quality that meant he was about to ask a question he already knew the answer to but needed to hear me say it anyway. Daddy, I'm so hungry. We haven't had a real meal in days. The quarters stopped moving in my hands. The world narrowed to just that question, hanging in the air between us like smoke. I opened my mouth, closed it. My throat felt like someone had filled it with sand. Before I could answer, before I could formulate the lie I was supposed to tell, the one that went, "No, baby, of course not. We'll be fine. Daddy has a plan," Liam spoke. "And if we go back home?" he said, his voice high and clear and innocent in the way only a 5-year-old's voice can be. "Will he hit you again?" The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the store, a price check was called over the intercom. A cart squeaked past the end of our aisle. I couldn't breathe. The cashier's eyes widened. She looked at me, then at my sons, then back at me. I saw the recognition in her face. The uncomfortable awareness that she'd just witnessed something she didn't know how to respond to. I started, but I didn't know what to say. How do you answer that question? How do you tell your 5-year-old son that, no, if we go back, Daddy Vincent will absolutely hit me again, and next time it might be worse than the black eye I had to cover with makeup for 2 weeks, worse than the bruised ribs that made it hard to breathe, worse than the night he choked me until I saw spots and Oliver stood in the doorway crying, and I knew that if we stayed one more night, something would break that couldn't be fixed? I didn't have to answer, because a voice came from behind us, deep, controlled, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. Add his groceries to ours. I turned. There were 3 men standing in line behind us. No, not just standing. They'd been there the whole time, and I hadn't noticed because I'd been too focused on counting change and trying not to fall apart in front of my children. They were identical. Triplets, clearly. Tall, over 6 feet each, broad-shouldered, dressed in the kind of clothes that cost more than I'd spent on groceries in the last 6 months. Dark suits, though their ties were loosened like they'd just come from work. They had the same sharp features, the same dark hair, the same gray eyes that were currently fixed on me with an intensity that made my Omega instincts scream both danger and something else I couldn't name. The one who'd spoken stepped closer. He moved carefully, deliberately, like he was approaching a spooked animal. His scent hit me even through my suppressants, alpha, unmistakably alpha, cedar and winter air, and something darker underneath. "I'm sorry," I managed. "I can't. I don't." "You're not taking anything," he said, his voice gentler now. "I'm offering. There's a difference." The second triplet, identical face, but something softer in his expression, was already adding things to my pile. Real bread, the good kind, a package of cheese, fresh apples, a carton of eggs, a jar of actual peanut butter, not the separated kind. "Please don't," I whispered, but my voice had no strength in it. Because the truth was, I was watching him add food to my pile, and I wanted it so badly it hurt. Wanted it for Oliver and Liam, who deserved real peanut butter and bread that wasn't falling apart. "Let us help," the third one said. He was crouched down now, at eye level with Oliver and Liam. "Is that okay? Can we help your dad?" Oliver looked at me. I saw the question in his eyes. I managed a small nod. The cashier rang everything up. The total came to $47.89. The first triplet pulled out a black credit card and handed it over without even looking at the amount. I stood there with my $18.67 in quarters and worn dollar bills, and I cried. Right there in the checkout line of a SaveMart at 8:47 on a Tuesday night, I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears that ran down my face while the cashier bagged the groceries in paper bags instead of plastic because one of the triplets had requested it. Oliver took my hand, squeezed it. "It's okay, Daddy," he whispered. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. I was accepting charity from strangers in a grocery store because I couldn't feed my children. Because I'd run from my husband with $112 in cash and it had taken 11 days to burn through it. Because I'd been sleeping in my car and using gas station bathrooms and trying to find shelters that had space and failing at all of it. The groceries were bagged. The triplets were still standing there. "Thank you," I managed to say. My voice cracked on both words. I can't repay you." "We're not asking you to," the first one said. Then, very carefully, "Do you have somewhere to go tonight? Somewhere safe?" I should have lied. Should have said, "Yes, of course. We have a place. Thank you for your concern." But I was so tired. 11 days of sleeping upright in a car seat had broken something in me, and the question came out before I could stop it. "We have the car." All three of them went very still, the kind of still that wasn't natural, that came from alphas whose protective instincts had just been triggered in a way they couldn't ignore. "You're sleeping in your car," the second one said. Not a question, a statement. "It's fine," I said automatically. The same lie I'd been telling everyone. The same lie my mother had told when my father no. I couldn't think about that. "We're managing." "For how long?" the third one asked. 11 days. The number fell between us like a stone. The first triplet pulled out his phone. "Made a call. Sullivan, I need a suite at the Weston Arms. Tonight, 2 bedrooms, under the name." He looked at me. "What's your name?" "Miles. Miles Harper." "Under Miles Harper. Clean linens. Full kitchen. Charge it to my account." He hung up. Looked at me. "There's a hotel room waiting for you. 2 bedrooms. Safe. Warm. The door locks from the inside." "I can't afford." "You're not paying," he said firmly. "We are." "Why?" The question came out sharp, defensive. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." Something passed across his face. Something old and painful and carefully controlled. "Our mother's name was Elizabeth," he said quietly. "She was an Omega. Our father was an Alpha who hurt her. For 10 years, he hurt her, and everyone looked away because it was easier than getting involved. She died when we were 16, not from what he did to her body, but from what it cost her to survive it." He stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "Nobody helped her," he continued. "Nobody stopped. People saw, people knew, but nobody did anything." His gray eyes met mine. "We're not looking away from you." I should have argued. Should have insisted I was fine, that we didn't need help, that I could handle this on my own. But Oliver was looking up at me with hope in his eyes for the first time in 11 days, and Liam was tugging on my sleeve, saying, "Daddy, does that mean we can sleep lying down tonight?" And I was so tired. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." The Weston Arms was not the kind of hotel I'd ever stayed in. It wasn't luxury, this wasn't some 5-star resort, but it was clean and safe and anonymous in a way that mattered when you were running from someone who'd filed false kidnapping charges to force you to come back. The suite was on the 4th floor, 2 bedrooms connected by a small living area with a couch and a kitchenette. The first triplet, who'd introduced himself as Damian Cross during the drive over, handed me the key card. 2 weeks, he said. Paid in full. After that, we'll figure out next steps. Next steps? I repeated. You need a lawyer, the second triplet, Adrian said. He had the same face as his brothers, but a gentler presence, something calmer. You said your ex-husband filed kidnapping charges. You need legal representation. I can't afford a lawyer. Margaret Calloway is the best family attorney in the state. The third triplet, Julian said. She handles cases like yours, custody disputes, protective orders. She's on retainer. Whose retainer? Ours. I stared at them. These 3 identical strangers who'd appeared in a grocery store checkout line and decided to rearrange my entire life in the span of 30 minutes. I don't understand, I said. Why are you doing this? Damien met my eyes. Because your son asked if you'd starve tomorrow. Because your other son asked if his father would hit you again. Because we heard those questions and we can't unhear them and we have the power to do something about it. He paused. So we are. They left after that. Gave me their business cards, all three of them, Cross Industries embossed in silver on black cardstock, and told me Margaret Calloway would call in the morning. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the middle of the hotel suite and looked around. 2 beds in the first bedroom, a couch that pulled out in the living area, a bathroom with clean towels, a kitchenette with a microwave and a mini fridge, a deadbolt on the door. Oliver walked over to it, put his hand on the metal. Can we lock it, Daddy? We can always lock it, I said, my voice breaking. He turned the deadbolt. The sound of it sliding into place was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in 11 days. Liam had already climbed onto one of the beds. He bounced twice, then stopped and looked at me with those enormous brown eyes. Daddy, can I sleep lying down? The question destroyed me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled both boys into my arms and held them so tightly that Liam patted my back and said, It's okay, Daddy. I liked sleeping sitting up too. And I cried, real tears this time, not the silent ones from the grocery store. The kind that come from somewhere deep inside where you've been holding everything together with wire and hope and sheer stubborn refusal to break in front of your children. I cried with my face in Oliver's hair and my arms around Liam, and I cried until there was nothing left. When I finally pulled myself together, Oliver was still holding my hand. Are we safe here? He asked quietly. I wanted to say yes, wanted to promise him that we were safe, that Vincent couldn't find us, that everything would be okay now. But Oliver was 7, and he'd learned the hard way that promises could be broken. So I told him the truth. I don't know yet, I said, but we're safer than we were yesterday, and tomorrow we'll try to be safer than we are today. He nodded. That was enough for him. We ate that night. Real food from the groceries the triplets had bought. Sandwiches with actual cheese and bread that didn't fall apart. Apples that weren't bruised. Milk that wasn't 2 days from expiring. Liam ate 3 sandwiches and fell asleep with peanut butter on his face. Oliver ate slowly, carefully, like he was still afraid it might disappear if he went too fast. I tucked them both into one bed. They wanted to sleep together, needed that closeness, and I sat on the couch and looked at the 3 business cards on the coffee table. Damien Cross, CEO. Adrian Cross, CFO. Julian Cross, COO. Cross Industries. I pulled out my phone, the cheap prepaid one I'd bought at a gas station, because Vincent had canceled our family plan the day after I left, and searched for Cross Industries. The results made my hands start shaking again. Cross Industries was a tech and real estate conglomerate worth billions. Billions with a B. The triplets weren't just wealthy. They were the kind of wealthy that bought buildings and influenced elections and had their faces on magazine covers. And they'd just paid for a hotel room for a stranger they'd met in a grocery store checkout line. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch and watched my sons breathe and tried to understand what had just happened, tried to figure out what they wanted from me, because nobody helped like this without wanting something in return. That was what Vincent had taught me. Kindness always came with conditions. But as I sat there in that hotel room with the deadbolt locked and my children finally sleeping, lying down, I couldn't figure out what 3 billionaire alphas could possibly want from a broken omega with nothing to give. Margaret Calloway called at 8:14 the next morning. Her voice was exactly what I'd expected from a lawyer who'd spent 30 years arguing in courtrooms sharp, precise, and kind in the places where kindness mattered most. Mr. Harper, she said, Damien Cross asked me to call you. I understand you're in a difficult situation. That was one way to put it. I need you to tell me everything, she continued. And I mean everything. Every incident, every time he hit you, every threat, every hospital visit. Every time you should have gone to the hospital but didn't. Can you do that? I looked at Oliver and Liam. They were still asleep, tangled together in a pile of blankets and stuffed animals. They looked peaceful, safe. Yes, I said, I can do that. So I told her. I told her about the first time Vincent hit me, 6 months into our marriage. A slap across the face because I'd laughed too loudly at a party and he said I was embarrassing him. I told her about the escalation, the punches, the choking. The night he threw me against the hallway wall so hard the plaster cracked and Oliver, who was 4 at the time, came out of his bedroom and asked if there was an earthquake. I told her about the isolation, How Vincent had systematically removed every person from my life. My college friends, he'd convinced me they were a bad influence. My coworkers from my part-time job, he'd made me quit, said I needed to focus on the family. My neighbor who used to bring over cookies on Sundays, Vincent, had accused me of having an affair with him until I stopped answering the door. One by one, everyone disappeared, until I had no one left but Vincent and the children. I told her about the night I left, about Vincent coming home drunk, about him hitting me in front of Oliver and Liam, about Liam standing in the hallway holding his stuffed dinosaur, not crying, not blinking, just watching like violence was weather, like it was rain or snow or something that just happened. And I told her about the worst part, the part I'd been too scared to tell anyone. He called the police, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He told them I kidnapped the boys, told them I'm mentally unstable. There's an alert. Child Protective Services is looking for me. If they find me, they'll take my sons. They'll send them back to him. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm filing an emergency motion today, emergency protective order. I need you to do something for me. What? Write down every incident you can remember. Dates if you have them, times, details, every bruise, every threat, every time he made you feel unsafe, every hospital visit, even the ones where you lied about how you got hurt. Can you do that? Yes. Good. I'm also contacting a domestic violence advocacy group. They'll assign you a caseworker. They'll help you access emergency funds, medical care, housing assistance beyond the 2 weeks at the hotel. You won't be doing this alone. My throat was tight. What about the kidnapping report? It's a common tactic, Margaret said, and something in her voice told me she'd seen this before, many times before. Abusers file false reports to maintain control, to force the other parent to return out of fear. The courts see through it when the documentation is strong. And Mr. Harper, your documentation is going to be very strong. I'll make sure of it. And CPS? I'll handle CPS. If they make contact, you refer them to me. You say nothing without me present. Understood? Understood. One more thing, Mr. Harper. Yes? You did the right thing. Leaving, running, protecting your boys. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. I know it feels like you're being hunted for doing the one thing any parent would do. But you did the right thing. And we're going to prove it. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the couch and looked at my hands. They were shaking. They'd been shaking for 11 days straight, but this was different. This wasn't fear. This was the terrifying, fragile possibility that someone was telling the truth, that help was real, that maybe, we were going to be okay. Oliver woke up first. He sat up in bed, his hair sticking up in every direction, and looked around the hotel room like he was trying to remember where we were. Daddy? He said. I'm here, buddy. He climbed out of bed and came over to me, crawled into my lap even though he was 7 and getting too big for it. I held him anyway. Was last night real? He asked quietly. Yeah, it was real. The men from the grocery store. They really helped us? They really helped us. Why? It was the same question I'd been asking myself all night. I still didn't have a good answer. I think, I said slowly, because they know what it's like to need help and not get it. And they decided they didn't want to be the kind of people who look away. Oliver was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he said, Are they going to make us go back? No, nobody's making us go back. Promise? I wanted to promise, wanted to say the words that would make him feel safe, but I'd learned not to make promises I couldn't keep. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we don't have to go back, I said instead. And I have help now, a lawyer. People who know how to fight this kind of fight. We're not alone anymore. That seemed to satisfy him. He stayed in my lap for a few more minutes, then went to wake up Liam by jumping on the bed until Liam shrieked with laughter. The sound of my children laughing, really laughing, not the careful, quiet laughter they'd developed in Vincent's house, made something in my chest crack open. We spent the day in the hotel room. I wrote down every incident I could remember for Margaret, filling page after page in a notebook the hotel had left on the desk. Oliver and Liam watched cartoons on the small TV. We ate cereal for breakfast and sandwiches for lunch, and I let them have as much as they wanted, which was its own kind of luxury. In the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I froze, looked through the peephole. It was Adrian Cross, one of the triplets, holding several shopping bags. I opened the door carefully, keeping the chain lock on. "I?" "Hi," he said, giving me a gentle smile. "I brought some things. Clothes for the boys, a few basics for you, toiletries. I wasn't sure what sizes, so I guessed. If anything doesn't fit, I kept the receipts." "You didn't have to." "I know. Can I come in? Just for a minute?" I unlatched the chain and let him in. He set the bags down on the couch and crouched down to Oliver and Liam's level. "Hey guys," he said. "I'm Adrian. We met last night at the store. I brought you some new clothes. Want to see?" Liam nodded enthusiastically. Adrian pulled out a bag and showed them jeans that actually fit. T-shirts with dinosaurs and spaceships on them, warm jackets, new shoes. Oliver looked at me. "Can we keep them?" The question broke my heart. 7 years old and he was asking permission to accept clothes that fit. "Yeah, buddy, we can keep them." While the boys tried on their new clothes in the bedroom, Adrian sat down on the couch next to me. He kept a respectful distance, didn't crowd my space. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. Overwhelmed, confused, grateful, terrified, all of it at once. "That makes sense." He was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Okay. Have you eaten today? I mean, really eaten? Not just picked at food while making sure your boys had enough?" I blinked at him. How did you wrapped half your sandwich in a napkin last night at the store," he said gently. "Saving it for later. It's a survival instinct. I recognize it." "Why would you recognize it?" His expression changed. Something old and sad passed across his face. "Our mother did the same thing. She'd eat half of whatever was on her plate and save the rest. Said she'd have it later. We didn't understand when we were kids. But looking back, I think she was making sure there was enough for us. Making sure that if our father got angry and threw away the food or broke the dishes, we'd already been fed." I didn't know what to say to that. "I brought lunch," Adrian continued, pulling out another bag. "From a deli down the street. Real food. Enough for all of you. Will you eat it? Please?" I looked at the bag. Looked at him. Saw a genuine concern in his eyes, not pity. Concern. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." We ate together, the four of us. Adrian sat on the floor and played dinosaurs with Liam while Oliver told him about his favorite books. It was so normal, so domestic, that I kept waiting for it to break. Kept waiting for Adrian to ask for something in return, to reveal what he really wanted. But he didn't. He just played dinosaurs and listened to Oliver talk about books and helped Liam when he spilled juice on his new shirt. When he got up to leave, he paused at the door. "Margaret's good," he said. "The best I've ever seen. If anyone can fix this, she can." "Why are you doing this?" I asked for what felt like the 100th time. "All of you, your brothers, you. Why?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I watched my mother sleep sitting up in a chair for 3 months after our father broke 2 of her ribs. Because I heard her lie to the doctor about how it happened. Because I was 12 years old and I knew she was lying and the doctor knew she was lying and nobody did anything about it. He met my eyes. Because you deserve better than what you've been given. And your sons deserve to grow up knowing that kindness doesn't always come with conditions." He left before I could respond. That night, after Oliver and Liam were asleep, I sat on the couch and pulled out my phone, searched for articles about Elizabeth Cross, found her obituary from 12 years ago. Beloved mother. Died peacefully at home, surrounded by her loving sons. The comments section told a different story. People who'd known her, people who'd seen the bruises, people who'd suspected but never said anything. I closed the browser and put my phone down and understood, finally, why 3 billionaire alphas had stopped in a grocery store checkout line and decided to rearrange a stranger's life. They were keeping a promise. To their mother, to themselves, to never look away again. The next few days moved faster than I thought possible. Margaret filed the emergency protective order. A judge reviewed the documentation, the hospital records I'd authorized her to access, the photos I'd taken of bruises with my phone and then deleted because I was scared Vincent would find them, the statement from Oliver's school counselor who'd noted his anxiety and withdrawal in her records. The judge granted the order within 48 hours. Vincent was served at our old house, the house I'd fled from 11 days ago, with papers that prohibited him from coming within 500 feet of me or the boys. Margaret called to tell me. He threw a chair through the window when he read it, she said. The officer who served him noted it in his report. That helps us. How does that help us? Because it demonstrates exactly the kind of violent temperament we're arguing makes him a danger to you and the children. He's establishing our case for us. The kidnapping report was flagged for investigation. When the detectives reviewed the timeline, the midnight departure, the lack of any prior custody dispute, the hospital records, the counselor's notes from Oliver's school, they quietly moved the case to the bottom of the pile and opened a new file, one with Vincent's name on it. Margaret arranged a meeting with Child Protective Services. I sat beside her in a small conference room in a building downtown, while a caseworker named Dennis reviewed the documentation. He was maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck and a folder full of forms. He looked at the evidence, looked at me, looked at Oliver and Liam sitting in the waiting room outside, drawing with crayons on the backs of old intake forms. Mr. Harper, he said finally, based on what I've reviewed here, I see no indication that these children are at risk in your care. I see every indication that they were at risk in the home they left. He closed the folder. The alert has been rescinded. You're free to go. I put my hands over my face and sobbed. Right there in the CPS conference room, I sobbed until Margaret put her hand on my shoulder and said quietly, You did it. You got them out. You kept them safe. The triplets didn't visit the hotel. I realized after a few days that this was deliberate. They were giving me space, giving me room to breathe and figure out my next steps without the pressure of their presence. But they kept watch. I found out later, much later, that they had someone checking on us daily, making sure the hotel room was secure, making sure Vincent hadn't found us, making sure we had everything we needed. It was Adrian who'd thought to send groceries twice a week, delivered by an anonymous service. Damien who'd made sure Margaret had everything she needed to build the strongest case possible. Julian who'd made a phone call to someone who made another phone call that resulted in Vincent understanding very clearly that there were boundaries he would be extremely unwise to cross. They protected us. But they did it from a distance, and I didn't understand why until much later. Until I understood that protection didn't mean presence. That sometimes the most powerful thing you could do for someone was set the machinery in motion and then step back and let them find their footing. 2 weeks after the night in the grocery store, I moved into a small apartment on the west side of the city. It was a 2-bedroom, nothing fancy, but it had windows that let in light and a kitchen with actual counter space and a door with a deadbolt that locked from the inside. The rent was covered for 6 months through an emergency assistance fund that Margaret had connected me to. A domestic violence organization had provided furniture, a couch, a table with 3 chairs, beds for both rooms. A volunteer had dropped off a box of kitchen supplies and a bag of groceries and a stuffed bear for Liam that was almost as big as he was. Oliver walked into the apartment and stood in the center of the living room, turned in a slow circle, looking at everything. Is this ours? He asked. Yes, I said. For real? For real. He walked over to the door, put his hand on the deadbolt. Can we lock it? We can always lock it. He turned the deadbolt himself, stood there with his hand on the metal, feeling the weight of it, the solidity of it. Then he turned around and smiled. Not the careful, managed smile he'd been wearing for weeks. A real smile, the kind that starts at the mouth and travels to the eyes and doesn't stop until it reaches somewhere deep inside where trust lives. Liam found the second bedroom, their bedroom, the one they'd share, and declared it the biggest room in the whole world, even though it was barely 10 feet across. Daddy, can I put my dinosaur stickers on the wall? He asked. You can put anything you want on the wall. He looked at me with pure, uncomplicated joy. The kind of joy that only exists in children who've been given something so simple and so enormous they don't have the language for it yet. Safety. That was the word. But Liam didn't know it. He just knew the door locked, and the bed was soft, and his father was sitting on the couch without looking over his shoulder. I got a job 3 weeks later. Part-time at first, working the front desk at a community center. It didn't pay much, but it was something. It was mine. It was a paycheck that had my name on it, deposited into a bank account that Vincent couldn't access. Margaret was still handling the legal situation. Vincent had filed for custody, claiming I was unfit, claiming I'd kidnapped his children, claiming I was mentally unstable and dangerous. Let him claim whatever he wants. Margaret said when I called her in a panic after receiving the papers. We have documentation. We have evidence. We have witnesses. And most importantly, we have the truth. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 months out. 3 months to prepare, 3 months to build our case. 3 months to try to build a life that looked stable enough that a judge would see I was fit to keep my children. It was during one of those 3 months that I saw them again, the triplets. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at the grocery store, not SaveMart this time, a different one closer to the apartment with Oliver and Liam. We were in the produce section, and the boys were arguing about whether we should get apples or oranges, when I heard a familiar voice. Why not both? I turned. All 3 of them were standing there. Damien, Adrian, and Julian Cross, looking slightly less formal than the last time I'd seen them, jeans and sweaters instead of suits, but still unmistakably them. Hi, I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Hi, Damien said, and something about the way he was looking at me made my chest feel tight. Not in a bad way. In a way I didn't have words for yet. Oliver and Liam recognized them immediately. The grocery store men, Liam announced happily. You helped us. We did, Adrian said, crouching down to Liam's level. How are you guys doing? You look good. New clothes? You gave us these clothes, Liam said, showing off his dinosaur shirt. They still fit. Julian was looking at me. Not at the boys, at me. How are you? He asked quietly. Better, I said. We have an apartment now. I have a job. The boys started school. We're okay. Good, he said, and the relief in his voice was genuine. That's really good. We stood there in the produce section, 6 feet apart, and I didn't know what to say. Thank you felt inadequate. I owe you everything felt too heavy. How do you possibly thank someone for saving your life? Would you, Damien started, then stopped. Started again. Would you let us take you to dinner? All of you? Nothing fancy, just dinner. We'd like to catch up, see how you're really doing. I should have said no. Should have recognized that 3 powerful alphas wanting to have dinner with a struggling Omega and his children was probably not as simple as it seemed. But Oliver was looking up at me with hope in his eyes, and Liam was already tugging on Julian's hand, asking if they could go somewhere with chicken nuggets, and I was so tired of being suspicious of kindness. Okay, I said. Dinner would be nice. We went to a family restaurant, the kind with paper placemats and crayons, and a kids' menu that came with a free sundae. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed billionaire CEOs trying to impress anyone. The boys sat on one side of the booth with Adrian. I sat on the other side with Damien and Julian flanking me. It should have felt overwhelming, being sandwiched between 2 alphas, but somehow it didn't. Somehow it felt safe. We ordered chicken nuggets and fries for Liam, grilled cheese for Oliver, a burger for me that I didn't have to wrap half of in a napkin for later. The triplets got their own meals and didn't make a big deal about paying for ours. So, Damien said once the food arrived, tell us how you're really doing. Not the polite answer, the real one. I looked at my boys. Oliver was showing Adrian a drawing he'd made at school. Liam was making a French fry talk like a person. They were happy, safe. Honestly, I said, I'm terrified. The custody hearing is in 2 months. Vincent has money. He has lawyers, multiple lawyers. He's claiming I'm unstable, that I kidnapped the boys, that I'm not fit to be a parent. My voice dropped lower. And some days, I look around at my tiny apartment and my part-time job and the fact that I'm still using a prepaid phone, and I think maybe he's right. He's not right, Julian said firmly. You're not unstable. You're surviving. There's a difference. The judge might not see it that way. Margaret will make sure they do, Damien said. She's the best. She doesn't lose cases like this. But what if? No what ifs. Adrian interrupted gently. You can't live in the what ifs. You'll drive yourself crazy. Focus on what you can control. The rest, you let Margaret handle. I wanted to believe them, wanted to trust that it would be okay. But I'd spent 5 years with Vincent, and Vincent had taught me that nothing was ever okay. That safety was an illusion. That the moment you let your guard down, everything fell apart. I don't know how to do this, I admitted quietly. How to trust that things might actually work out. How to believe that people help without wanting something in return. The 3 of them exchanged a look, Some unspoken communication that only triplets could have. "We don't want anything from you, Miles," Damien said, "except maybe for you to let us be part of your life, if you want that. No pressure, no expectations." "Why?" I asked for what felt like the 100th time. "Why do you care?" Adrian reached across the table and very carefully, very gently, touched my hand, just his fingertips on the back of my hand, barely contact at all. But I felt it like an electric shock. "Because from the moment we heard your son ask if you'd starve tomorrow," he said quietly, "we couldn't unhear it. Because we saw you putting back bread to feed your children, and we recognized that sacrifice. Because our mother made that same sacrifice for us, and nobody helped her, and we swore we'd never let that happen again if we had the power to stop it." Julian leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that only I could hear it over the noise of the restaurant. "And because the moment we caught your scent, even through those suppressants you're on, all three of us felt it. The pull, the recognition. And we think you might be our fated mate." I froze. The world narrowed to just those words. Fated mate. "That's not," I started. "That's not possible. Fated mates are rare. And 3 alphas and 1 omega? That's rare," Damien agreed. "But not impossible. It happens. Not often, but it happens. And Miles, we felt it, all three of us, at the same time. The need to protect you. The pull toward you. The absolute certainty that you belonged with us." I pulled my hand back from Adrian's touch. Not because it felt wrong, but because it felt too right, and I didn't know how to handle that. "I can't," I whispered. "I can't think about this right now. I have a custody hearing in 2 months. I have 2 kids who need stability. I can't. I don't have room in my life for this." "We know," Julian said. "We're not asking you to. We're just asking you to let us be here. Let us be your friends, if nothing else. Let us help with the custody battle. Let us be present for you and your boys in whatever capacity you're comfortable with. And if I'm not your fated mate, if you're wrong, then we're wrong," Damien said simply. "And we'll still be here, still helping, still present, because you deserve that regardless of what biology says." I looked at them. 3 identical faces, 3 different expressions. Damien's steady determination, Adrian's gentle hope, Julian's protective intensity. "I need time," I said finally. "I need to get through the custody hearing. I need to make sure my boys are safe before I can even think about anything else." "Take all the time you need," Adrian said. "We're not going anywhere." The custody hearing happened on a gray Tuesday in November. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal, with fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. Vincent sat on the opposite side with his lawyers, 3 of them, all in expensive suits, all looking like they'd never lost a case in their lives. Margaret sat beside me. Damien, Adrian, and Julian sat in the gallery behind us. They'd insisted on coming, on being present, even though I told them they didn't have to. "We want to be here," Damien had said. "For you." Vincent looked good. He always looked good. Clean-cut, well-dressed, the kind of alpha that made judges think stable, responsible, upstanding citizen. He looked at me across the courtroom, and for a second, I saw the flash of rage in his eyes, the same rage I'd seen the night he hit me in front of the boys. Then he smiled at the judge and looked like a concerned father worried about his children. The hearing was brutal. Vincent's lawyers painted me as unstable, questioned my decision to flee in the middle of the night, suggested I'd manufactured the abuse claims to gain custody, pointed out that I was currently living in a small apartment on assistance, working part-time, barely making ends meet. "And isn't it true, Mr. Harper?" one of the lawyers said, leaning on the table in front of me, "that you're currently cohabiting with 3 unmated alpha males? Exposing your children to an unstable living situation?" "I'm not cohabiting with anyone," I said, my voice shaking. "I have my own apartment. The gentlemen you're referring to are friends who helped me when I had nowhere to go. Friends who paid for your hotel room. Friends who hired your lawyer. Friends who seem to have a very vested interest in the outcome of this case. One might wonder what kind of relationship requires that level of financial investment." "Objection," Margaret said sharply. "Counsel is implying facts not in evidence and making inappropriate insinuations about Mr. Harper's character." "Sustained," the judge said, looking tired. "Move on, counselor." But the damage was done. I could see it in the judge's face, the question mark, the concern. Then it was Margaret's turn. She presented the evidence. The hospital records from 3 years ago when I'd fallen down the stairs and fractured 2 ribs. The photos I had taken of bruises and then deleted, but not before they'd been backed up to the cloud automatically. The statement from Oliver's school counselor noting his anxiety, his withdrawal, his fear of going home. And then she called Oliver to testify. They brought him in through a side door. He looked so small in the big courtroom, wearing the nice clothes Adrian had bought him, holding Margaret's hand. The judge spoke to him gently, explained that he just needed to answer some questions, that he should tell the truth, that nobody was going to be mad at him no matter what he said. Oliver nodded, sat in the chair, looked at me. I gave him a small nod, trying to tell him it was okay. "Oliver," the judge said, "do you feel safe with your father, with Miles?" "Yes," Oliver said immediately. "Can you tell me why you feel safe?" Oliver thought about it for a moment, then he said, "Because Daddy doesn't hit us, and he doesn't hit himself anymore. And when I asked him if we were going to starve, he found people who could help us. And now we have an apartment with a lock on the door, and Liam can put stickers on the walls, and Daddy smiles sometimes." "And do you feel safe with your other father? With Vincent?" Oliver's whole body went tense. "No." "Can you tell me why not?" "Because he hurt Daddy. I saw him, and Liam saw him. And Daddy had a black eye for 2 weeks and said he walked into a door. But I knew. I'm 7. I'm not stupid. I knew Daddy Vincent hurt him." The courtroom was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "Do you want to live with Daddy Vincent?" the judge asked gently. "No," Oliver said, and his voice broke. "I want to stay with Daddy Miles. And Mr. Damien and Mr. Adrian and Mr. Julian, they're nice to us. They help us. They make Daddy smile." Vincent's lawyer tried to redirect, tried to ask Oliver about the apartment, about school, about whether we had enough food. But Oliver answered every question with the same calm honesty that made it clear he understood exactly what was at stake. They let him leave after that. Margaret walked him back to the waiting room where Liam was, with a court advocate. Then it was my turn to testify. I told the judge everything. Every hit, every threat. Every time I'd lied to protect Vincent because I was scared of what would happen if I told the truth. Every time I'd made excuses because I thought I could control it, could fix it, could somehow be good enough that he'd stop. "And the night you left?" the judge asked. "He hit me in front of the boys," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Liam was holding his stuffed dinosaur. He just stood there, didn't cry, didn't move. Just watched like it was normal, like violence was weather. I looked at the judge. I knew if I stayed one more night, my children would grow up thinking that was love, that this was what relationships looked like. And I couldn't let that happen. "So you took them and you ran?" "Yes. In the middle of the night, with no plan, no support system, no money. I had $112 from the kitchen drawer, and an emergency bag I'd packed 3 months earlier, and a hope that somewhere, somehow, I could find safety for my children." "And did you find safety?" I thought about the grocery store, about Oliver's question, about 3 alphas who'd heard it and couldn't unhear it. "Yes," I said, "I did." The judge called a recess. We waited for 2 hours in a small room while she reviewed the evidence and made her decision. Damien, Adrian, and Julian sat with me. Didn't say much, just were there. Solid, present. When we were called back in, the judge looked at all of us. At me, at Vincent, at the lawyers. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented today," she said. "I've listened to testimony from both parties. I've spoken with the child, and I've made my decision." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, looking at Vincent, "the evidence presented today paints a clear picture of domestic violence. Hospital records, photographic evidence, witness testimony. Your son's statement, I find the allegations against you to be credible and concerning." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Mr. Harper," she continued, looking at me, "I find that you acted in the best interests of your children when you removed them from a dangerous situation. While the method of your departure was unconventional, it was necessary given the circumstances." She looked down at her notes. "I'm granting sole physical and legal custody to Miles Harper. Vincent Reed's parental rights are hereby terminated. The existing protective order will be made permanent. Mr. Reed is prohibited from any contact with Mr. Harper or the children. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering Mr. Reed to pay child support retroactive to the date of separation, as well as reimbursement for Mr. Harper's legal fees. She banged her gavel. This hearing is concluded. Margaret put her hand on my shoulder. You won, she said quietly. You won, Miles. I put my hands over my face and sobbed. Right there in the courtroom, I sobbed until Damien pulled me into his arms and held me while I fell apart. We won. The boys were mine. Vincent couldn't touch us. We were safe. That night, the five of us, me, Oliver, Liam, and the triplets went to dinner. A real celebration dinner at a nice restaurant where the boys ordered whatever they wanted and nobody said a word about the cost. Oliver got pasta. Liam got chicken nuggets, his favorite. I got the first steak I'd had in 6 years. Halfway through the meal, Liam looked at Damien and said, very seriously, Are you going to be our dads now? Like, for real? The table went quiet. Damien looked at me. That depends on your daddy, he said carefully, on what he wants. What do you want, Daddy? Oliver asked, looking at me with those two old eyes. What did I want? I looked at the triplets. At Damien, who'd paid for a hotel room without being asked. At Adrian, who'd brought us groceries and clothes and sat on the floor playing dinosaurs. At Julian, who'd stood between Vincent and me in a parking lot and made sure I was safe. I looked at my boys, who were happy and safe and eating dinner without fear for the first time in their lives. I said slowly, to give this a chance. If you still want that, if you're sure. We're sure, all three of them said in unison. Oliver grinned. Does that mean yes? It means yes, I said, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt like I could breathe all the way to the bottom of my lungs. The courtship happened slowly. They didn't rush me, didn't push, just were present in whatever capacity I was comfortable with. The first real date was with Damien. He picked me up on a Saturday morning. Oliver and Liam were at a play date that Adrian had arranged with another family from their school and took me to a quiet cafe on the west side. I thought we could just talk, he said, pulling out my chair. No pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. We talked for 3 hours, about everything. About his work across industries, how he'd built it from his parents' small tech startup into what it was now. About my aborted pre-law education, how I'd been 2 semesters from graduating when I met Vincent and he'd convinced me to drop out. You could finish, Damien said quietly. If you wanted, we could make it work. Flexible schedule, childcare, whatever you needed. I don't know if I want to be a lawyer anymore, I admitted. I thought I did, but now I think I just want to be present for my boys, want to give them stability. That's not a small thing, he said. Stability, presence, that's everything. He told me about watching his mother try to maintain stability in an unstable house, about how she'd had dinner on the table at 6 every night, no matter what their father had done that afternoon, how she'd helped them with homework and packed their lunches and made sure their school uniforms were clean, even when she was nursing broken ribs. She gave us everything she had, Damien said, his voice rough, and it killed her. Not all at once, slowly. Like a leak in a dam that nobody fixed until the whole thing collapsed. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, he said, lacing his fingers through mine. Just let us be here for you. Let us make sure you don't have to do what she did. Let us share the weight. The second date was with Adrian. He came to the apartment with bags of groceries and a plan. I'm teaching you to cook, he announced. Real cooking, not just heating up ramen. Actual meals. I know how to cook, I protested. You know how to make food with 3 ingredients and a prayer. I'm teaching you to make food that nourishes. There's a difference. He was right. I watched him move around my small kitchen like he belonged there, chopping vegetables with precise, practiced movements. He taught me how to make a proper stir-fry, how to season chicken so it wasn't dry, how to roast vegetables until they caramelized. Cooking is care, he said, standing behind me and guiding my hands as I stirred. It's love in a tangible form. My mother taught me that. She said that even when everything else was falling apart, she could put a good meal on the table and know she'd done one thing right that day. We cooked together, and then we sat down and ate what we'd made, and it was the first time in years I'd had a meal that felt like home. The third date was with Julian. He showed up at 7 in the morning with workout clothes and a determined expression. "Self-defense," he said. "You need to know how to protect yourself." We went to the park. He taught me how to break a grab, how to use my size as an advantage instead of a liability, how to hit and where to hit if I needed to. "You're stronger than you think," he kept saying. "Stop pulling your punches. You survived, Vincent. You got your boys out. You're a fighter, Miles. You just need to remember that." By the end of the session, I was sweating and exhausted and felt more powerful than I had in years. "Again next week," Julian said. "Every week until you can take me down." "I'll never be able to take you down," I protested. "You outweigh me by 80 pounds. "Then I'll teach you how to fight someone who outweighs you by 80 pounds," he said simply. "Because size isn't everything. Strategy is. And you, Miles Harper, are smarter than you give yourself credit for." They never stayed the night. Never pushed for more than I could give. Just slowly, carefully, built trust. It was 6 months before I let them kiss me. All three of them, one right after another, standing in my kitchen after the boys had gone to bed. Gentle kisses that asked permission with every touch. It was 8 months before my heat came. I felt it building, felt my suppressants failing, and I panicked. Called Adrian because he was the most medical. They all showed up within 10 minutes. "We're here," Damien said. "Whatever you need, however you need it, we're here." They helped me through 3 days of heat with a level of care and restraint I didn't know alphas were capable of. Built me a nest, provided scent, held me when the pain was bad, fed me, kept me hydrated, talked me through every wave. But they didn't claim me, didn't bond me, didn't take advantage even when I begged them to make it stop. "Not like this," Damien said firmly, holding my hand while I shook. "When we bond you, when we claim you, it'll be because you chose us with a clear head, not because heat made the choice for you." When the heat broke, I woke up to find all three of them still there, exhausted, rumpled, but there. They'd stayed the entire time, had taken shifts so I was never alone, had protected me from myself and from them. That's when I knew. This wasn't just biology. This wasn't just fated mates. This was real. "Bond me," I said. "I want this. I want all of this. I choose you." They made sure, asked me 3 times if I was certain, made me wait another week to make sure it wasn't the heat talking. But I knew. I'd known for months. I just hadn't been ready to admit it. The bonding happened quietly. No ceremony, no witnesses, except Oliver and Liam, who insisted on being there because we're a family now, right? In my apartment, in the living room, with the afternoon sun coming through the windows, I knelt in front of them. 3 bites, 3 bonds, 3 promises. The moment the bonds snapped into place, I felt them, all 3 of them. Their love, their protection, their absolute devotion. It was overwhelming and perfect, and exactly what I needed. Oliver looked up at Damien. "So you're really our dads now? For real?" "For real," Damien said, and there were tears in his eyes. "Finally," Liam said, "can we have ice cream to celebrate?" We had ice cream, a lot of ice cream. 3 years later, I'm standing in our kitchen, not my kitchen, our kitchen, watching Oliver help Julian with breakfast. He's 10 now, confident and happy and so different from the scared 7-year-old in the grocery store. Liam is 8, sitting at the table with a book about dinosaurs, reading out loud to no one in particular. Damien comes in from his morning run, kisses the top of my head, and steals a piece of bacon from the pan. Adrian appears from upstairs with our daughter Emma. She's 18 months old, born a year after the bonding. She's babbling happily, reaching for me. I take her, breathing in her baby scent, and feel the bonds with my 3 mates humming contentedly in my chest. I'm pregnant again, 6 months, along with twins. We found out last month. Oliver and Liam are excited about having more siblings. Emma doesn't understand yet, but she pats my belly sometimes like she knows something is there. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asks, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist, careful of my growing stomach. "That night," I say softly. "The grocery store. How different everything could have been." "But it's not different," Julian says, flipping a pancake. "You're here, boys are here, Emma's here, twins are coming. We're all here together." "Because you heard us," I say, turning to look at all 3 of them. Because you didn't look away. Damien pulls me into his arms, Emma squeezed between us. Because we loved you from the moment we saw you, putting back bread to feed your children. Because everything in us recognized our Omega even before we consciously understood it. Because you and your boys are ours, and we are yours, and that's how it was always supposed to be. Oliver looks up from the stove. I'm glad I asked about food that day, he says seriously. I'm glad I was hungry, because it brought us our family. Liam closes his book. I'm not hungry anymore, Daddy Miles. Not ever. We always have enough now. I look at my children, all 4 of them, with 2 more on the way. Look at my mates, who saved us and loved us and gave us everything. Me neither, baby, I whisper. Not anymore. Through the bonds, I feel them. Damien's fierce protectiveness, Adrian's gentle devotion, Julian's steady strength. I feel their love for me, for Oliver, for Liam, for Emma, for the twins we haven't met yet. This is my family. This is my home. This is what happened when 3 alphas heard a child ask if they'd starve tomorrow and decided to make sure the answer was no. Not just for one day, not just for one meal, but for always. Thank you for joining Miles Harper's journey from desperate single father to bonded Omega with 3 devoted alphas and a beautiful growing family. If this story of poverty overcome, custody battles won, and love found in the most unexpected places touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more BL Omegaverse stories. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it Oliver saying he hadn't had a real meal in days? Or the moment the judge granted custody? Or the bonding ceremony with the boys as witnesses? Until next time, remember, sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best. Sometimes being brave enough to ask for help or brave enough to say I'm hungry brings exactly the right people into our lives. And sometimes the people who save us are the ones who've been waiting their whole lives to find someone to protect. Love finds us when we need it most.